just a few miles away from the prison where he was released yesterday on the orders of a French court. The judges concluded that Mr. Shaler was facing political charges, which were therefore not covered by the extradition treaty with France. It emerged today that the court thought any disclosure of defence secrets would be covered by the exemption for political offences. That's bound to worry senior staff at Britain's Secret Intelligence Service, still smarting after a disaffected officer was convicted of disclosing secrets to a publisher. To avoid compromising his former contacts, Richard Tomlinson's face can't be shown.
When people write down things in a minute or take a decision, subconsciously they think, well, I'm never going to have to answer to this in court or in front of a committee of MPs, and that produces all sorts of very poor decision-making, poor management. If those things were put in place, then there would never be any need for people like myself and David Shaler to ever go to the press.
But those responsible for security say staff can't be allowed to disclose secrets.
For an intelligence service to work, if we want people to save lives and protect national security, they've got to have the confidence, if they go to the intelligence services, that somebody won't then leak their names.
But what about...
It's believed the French Justice Ministry is planning an appeal against the interpretation of the political exemption which set David Shaler free, although a higher court would not be expected to rule before next summer. By then, the former MI5 officer could be anywhere. Joshua Rosenberg, BBC News.
The time is coming up to 16 minutes past 6. Still to come. China...
That a massive epidemic of smoking-related deaths is about to hit China. They're already running at 2,000 a day, but if things don't change, the figure will rise to 8,000. That's 3 million a year by the middle of the next century.
Across China, smokers now get through 1,800 billion cigarettes a year, a 20-fold increase in just one generation, which has meant China has now taken over from the United States in having the highest number of deaths from smoking in the world. Zhao Sejong has lung cancer and is recovering from major surgery. He tries to blow up a balloon for exercise, but his 30-a-day habit has left him continually breathless.
I'll try to persuade my friends to smoke less, but whether or not they listen will depend on how sensible they are. Some Chinese are very ignorant, and they insist on thinking that smoking won't have any effect on them.
Professor Richard Peto of Oxford University was part of an international team which spoke to 1.25 million Chinese about their smoking habits and medical history. Unveiling his results at the British Medical Association in London, he said he hoped China would eventually follow Britain's example.
In Britain, back in the 1960s, we had the worst death threats from smoking in the world. And over the last 30 years, we've had the best decrease in tobacco deaths in the world. Now, in China 30 years ago, there weren't very many cigarettes, there weren't very many people dying from smoking, but over the last 30 years, they've had the world's biggest increase in cigarettes, and they've now got the world's biggest increase in cigarette deaths, and it's going to go a lot further.
The fundamental problem is that 2/3 of the population in China still believe that smoking isn't harmful, and unless attitudes change, then tobacco will eventually kill 1/3 of all the young men in China, at the rate of 3 million every year. Western tobacco firms are desperate to break into the Chinese market. At this Beijing disco, a British brand is handed out free to customers who regard foreign cigarettes as status symbols. Just 1% of Chinese women smoke, compared with 2/3 of young Chinese men. Researchers warn that the big risk now is an explosion in female tobacco consumption, with horrendous health consequences in 30 years' time. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
The high street electrical retailer Dixons has rejected claims by the computer chip manufacturer Intel that it's reducing sales of personal computers in Britain by charging high prices. Dixons say their margins are wafer thin and that their sales have actually increased over the last 6 months.
Dixons are one of the major players in the electrical goods retail market, with a substantial share of home computer sales. But now they stand accused by the biggest supplier of computer chips of charging excessive prices for PCs. Intel, which make chips for a large percentage of computers on the market, say that Dixons' pricing structure is having a negative impact on sales. In reply, Dixons are accusing Intel of trying to make excuses for their falling market share, saying they can't make any sense of Intel's comments. They go on.
Intel are probably interpreting their loss of market share in our stores as a problem in the market as a whole. In fact, we are selling more PCs in our stores that have non-Intel chips, and their market share has fallen considerably.
As well as their own stores, Dixons also own a clutch of high street names, including PC World, Currys and The Link.
They've been soaking up many different high street chains over the years now, and they're now in a very dominant position. And so for them to be singled out and pointed to as a company which is perhaps helping maintain higher prices is not going to do them any good.
A glance at the internet shows that a computer which sells here for around £1,200 costs the equivalent of £800 in the United States. Prices have started to come down in recent weeks because the supermarkets have entered the fray, and this has made the home computer industry in the UK far more competitive.
For far too long now, traditional PC retailers have considered more about their own profits than delivering value to customers, and this is where we're going to make that breakthrough.
In this vital pre-Christmas trading period, the PC war is hotting up. June Kelly, BBC News.
Details of the £540 million Sure Start programme for young children have been unveiled by the government. It's estimated